Right, councillors, we are past the appointed time, so we'll commence our meeting. I'd like to welcome you all to AP LTP 2022/3 and welcome councillors and staff to this meeting. The meeting is being live streamed under COVID-19 protection framework Orange. And so there may well be members of the public join us by Zoom. I understand Councillor Gray is attending by Zoom, Board Chair Richard Crawford, and I think Councillor Marsh has been trying to connect as well. We don't have any late items. Are there any declarations of interest anyone wishes to declare? Seems not. Okay, we don't have any public forum, so we'll go to the business of the meeting. Well, there are no presentations, so we have our annual plan deliberations then. So first report, Matthew is also with us, I believe, by Zoom, but Emily, we're in your hands for a start.
Thank you, Chair John. Good morning, Mayor and councillors. So today's meeting is for you to undertake the formal deliberations on the annual plan and also the schedule of fees and charges for 2022-2023, which you've both had out for consultation for a 1-month period. And now is the time to consider the submissions that were received through that consultation process. There's one report on the agenda which sets out all of the topics for deliberations. So the intention, Mr. Chair, is if we can work through those probably one by one in terms of the topics for deliberations and take any comments or questions on each of those topics as we move through.
Okay, thank you. So we're ready to go to the first one then. So that's as per the screen.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just wondered if you wanted to consider recommendations 1 to 3 before you start on number 4, which relates to the Pukehina development rate.
Yes, that makes sense as per the discussions we had earlier. Thank you, Councillor.
1, 2 and 3.
That we consider them, not that we accept them all together. Clarify that.
I'll move that we accept recommendations 1 to 3.
Yeah. So that's all written and verbal feedback is received, sir, and just
Accept the recommendations rather than approving them. Is that what you're saying? Am I clear?
we're accepting that all written.
Move recommendations 1 to 3.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So that's been moved. Councillor Denia, we have a seat. No,
Numbers
no,
1, 2,
we're
3.
still coming to that. This is.
If you're receiving them, I'm happy to second it, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move option 1 as well.
No, we'll come to that after we've dealt with the first bit.
If I could just clarify.
Recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 3.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Page 6 of the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a question.
Chairman, I'd just like to speak
sorry.
to
Speak.
item 3 of that, and I just would question why a letter to the council was included as a recommendation or as an annual plan submission. It was not even labelled as an annual plan submission. It was a letter to an open letter to the council, and it was on the occasion of our annual plan. It was not entitled to be a submission to the annual plan, and I just wonder why it was included.
Are we able to have an explanation at all about that?
I assume that you are referring to the letter around the vaccination
Yes.
considerations. So I guess this is the consultation period that we had open at the time, and that there would be council would need to consider that matter at some stage. If you would like to redirect that as a submission to another process, then you could move a motion to that effect. But otherwise, the staff view with this was the most appropriate process for that to be considered, given the processes that we had open at the time and giving a timely response to that submitter.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that. I don't want it redirected to another process.
And if I'm correct in assessing the letter you're referring to, it did refer in that to the fact that he had canvassed all councils in New Zealand through their annual plan and long-term plan processes. So that's probably added to the reason why council staff filed it in this process. All right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. We move on then to Pukehina development rate. Councillor Murray Benge.
I'm happy to move option 1 on both, and both topic 2, option 1. I'll speak to it.
Do we have a seconder then? Are you wanting to second that? No. It seems we lapse for want of a seconder.
Marcus,
All right. It has been moved and seconded then. Are there any questions? Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, it's not a question because you have a resolution in front of you, Mr. Chair. I cannot support option 1 at all. It is contrary to what the public wanted us to look at. And I think we have a difficulty now because I think option 2 is what the community wanted. And how do we go to a direct negative? Staff
Yes.
may want to help us out in this. Thank you.
Sir, I moved it. I'd like to speak to it.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So my understanding is that the other option can be put because this is an issue and option with 2 equal options in front of you.
Yep.
Well, I'm speaking to option 1, Mr. Chairman, on the understanding that one cannot guarantee that this will be passed, that the 3 waters will be passed by the present government. If it is, then clearly the opposition is saying it will reverse the decision and 3 waters will not go ahead. The people of Pukehina who want to have sewage schemes in their area, they're ready for it. And if they're not seen to be helping, how can we then ask for government support as we did with Makatu? It's just so logical that I think it's really disastrous if we try and stall in any way. It's obviously clearly a division around the council table. Some want the 3 waters, the majority don't. And the 3 waters that we provide for our council, our community, are of a high standard. And it's really important that Makatu is in line to get the scheme that they need.
All right. There seems no other speakers. I want to say a few words. I don't believe this is really anything to do with 3 waters. A large number of Pukehina residents have been requesting that we cease this and possibly even repurpose it. We've canvassed this extensively that the repurposing of the rate is not practical at this point in time, or if at all. So there are indeed a large number of residents at Pukehina that would like to see it ceased. And I believe that the option 2, as we discussed, is the appropriate mechanism, because we stop this and give some time for the dust to settle and see where to proceed from there. So I am voting, will be voting against this resolution. We have another speaker, Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I will not be supporting this resolution. I believe pause is the appropriate action. I do acknowledge that the community was split between pause, stop and continue, but I believe on the balance of numbers and support, pause is a prudent option at this stage. So it's unfortunately I support option 1 in the second part, but I won't be supporting the current motion.
Thank you. Seems we've exhausted the speakers. I'll put the motion. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I ignored you, Councillor Marsh. Yes.
Don't worry about that. That's not the
You
first,
say something before I put the motion.
not the first time. Well, John and I have been to a lot of these meetings, and particularly I've been over the last many years, and the people are for it, against this. They're a split, but the majority are keeping for keeping this on for this actual purpose. And it's not going to be, if this going to be a sewage scheme, it's going to be when it comes. So we, by pausing it, at least we do not need to put that money into any other part of their what some of them are looking for. I think if we keep it for that purpose, at least we're going to have, well, 500,000 or something to go towards the sewage scheme. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion then. All those in favour of option 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. I declare the motion lost. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I would move option 2 of topic 1, which is we'll put it on pause for the next 2 years.
Okay, councillor, it's been, thank you. It's been seconded, councillor Sol. Are there any speakers? Yes, councillor Sol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, at present, this is definitely the most logical and prudent action we could take for the people in Pukehina who have invested a sizable sum of money over the years, and at least we secure it for them. If there is, well, there's nothing surer than they are going to need to have a sewage scheme installed at some stage in the future. So to me, we are in the throes of 3 waters coming through, and we're not sure where this is going. I believe our job is governance. Our job is to look after the interests of our people, and I believe that the pause, or I think we even referred to it as a 0 rate for 2 years, would be the most sensible thing for us to do for the people of Pukehina at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Yes, I'd like to speak against this motion. I believe it's the wrong option. I think we should be choosing option 4. That is truly what the people have told us in the consultation. They came to us, they gave us a very comprehensive presentation about why they thought this rate should be stopped and why they thought repurposing it for local benefit was a much better option. The money that's been collected over 20 years, 483,000, that equates to about $765 for each ratepayer, including interest, which is nearly 40% of that total. We know that 3 waters reform is likely to happen, and we don't know what the outcome of that will be for this small isolated rural community. They don't have a community board. They've got a residents and ratepayers association, which is very active. They've got democratically elected governance within that association. They don't get paid for their time. In some ways, they're a more mandated organisation than even some community boards. So we know that to build a new sewage scheme for Pukehina is going to be in the order of $30 million plus to build. For the 632 ratepayers or residents, that equates to about $47,000 per person. When we went to this community in Makatu 10 years ago to build the Makatu sewerage scheme. There was an option to include Pukehina ratepayers into that scheme. It would have required a pipeline across the estuary. We know iwi were opposed to that, but the contribution that ratepayers would have had to have paid at that time was about $15,000. So if we were serious about building a sewerage scheme in Pukehina, why weren't we collecting $1,000 a year to go towards it? Because 483,000 is just a drop in the bucket. What's the point? And the public consultation, we did get feedback from the residents. We got 138 responses. 80% were in favour of pausing, stopping, or repurposing. Only 20% wanted to continue the rate. And the biggest percentage was actually to repurpose the rate. 31 to 34% if you analyse it correctly. So I don't believe this is the preferred option. Only 17% supported pausing this rate. So I really believe that in the interests of this small rural community, they want to repurpose this. Well, I guess I can talk about it in the next one. So I won't talk about that right now. But so I think the best purpose, no, I will talk about that, sorry. This community does not get any discretionary funding like community boards get. Anyone who's ever supported a community board in our district should understand why a community board or residents and ratepayers association has should have the right to form their own community. They've got plans afoot to establish cycleways. They want to improve their parks.
Could you stick to the motion before us?
So I believe this is the wrong option. Option 4 is the correct option. I will be opposing this. Thank you.
Councillor Denia. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm speaking in favour of option 2 for pause. Reasons have been outlined already. I just wanted to speak against what Councillor Daly has just said. I think repurposing is muddled thinking. It effectively combines option 3 with a stop, with a further unwritten option to create a new rate for unknown purposes. And if we want a new rate, this is not the right process, the way to go about it. So I'm for option 2, pause. Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Clearly there is, I'm for option pausing, and the reasons are because clearly there is seems to be a division or a conflict in what we're hearing across the table here. And so I don't agree with repurposing because I think pause is the right option. We don't know what's going to be happening within the next couple of years with Three Waters. And if we actually repurpose it, and we clearly Makatu needs a wastewater scheme out there, we've got that option. It's sitting there waiting for what we've got ahead, and we've got it there so we can make that decision when we get to it. So option 2.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh, you wish to come back in there?
Yeah, I do. Councillor Daly, you need to get your facts 100% correct, which you haven't. The issue was the pipeline was one, but the Makatu sewage scheme was given to the people of Makatu because they're a really low decile community, and Pukehina was not classed as that. They were classed as a wealthy place. So that made one hell of a difference. Sure, we couldn't get across the estuary because the Maori people didn't want that to happen. But the other thing was that it was too wealthy to have it down there. So that's why.
Thank you. All right. You've had your turn speaking. Have you not on this motion?
No, I didn't.
No. Okay. Sorry.
My advice, though, Mr. Chairman, if you could just tell Kevin to stop shaking in his chair, it would be much more comfortable looking at him and listening to him. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Please, could you speak to the motion? Oh,
And speaking to the motion, I sympathise with what Councillor Daly has said, but I agree it's too soon for that. If this magical Three Waters does go ahead and there is money from heaven coming down for us all, then obviously it would be sensible to redirect the money. But at the moment, sir, it's too soon to consider that. If I have to compromise, I'll go for the pause.
Thank you. Mayor, would you like your right of
Right, I'll
reply?
reply, yes. Just let's get back to basics. When you are going through an annual plan, we've gone through a submission, we need to take heed of the public submissions. In my analysis, and we can all cut and dice the numbers the way we like it, but staff's recommendation is to go with option 2. That's what the public would prefer us to do. And therefore, to me, option 2 is the only sensible thing. And to support our decision and going back to the community is based on the the submissions we received. This was the best option available. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to put the motion. And the motion, I remind you, is that we pause collecting the Pukehina development rate for the next 2 years. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry.
Yes, sir.
All right. We've dealt with that one. You ready to move on? Part 2 of topic 2. Yes. The one about refunding these monies that have already been collected. So, Councillor Thwaites.
Move option 1 that we retain the accumulated funds. This is what we observed this 2-year period.
Thank you. All right. Will you go? No. Okay. So it's moved, Councillor Thwaites, seconded by the Mayor. Is there any discussion? Any speakers? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Sorry, did you have a question?
Want the reasons as we go through, or how do you want to take this?
Can I have some guidance from the staff there as to, do we want the rationale behind why we make these decisions as you go, or are we going to deal with that at the end?
I think your Chair, John, that it would be useful if you did that as you went through while it's fresh in your mind, perhaps.
Okay. Did you wish to comment then, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I think again, because of the previous resolution we just passed, it is prudent and pragmatic to take this approach to leave the funds where they are for the next 2 years.
Okay. Councillor Sol.
Yeah, could I even be a little bit pedantic maybe here and say even up to the next 2 years? Because I guess if we want to go to move, Sorry, can I be pedantic and say that perhaps we ought to include maybe the words up to, just so that if there is a period where things have to change, the situation could be quite flux, that we are able to move?
So that we have the opportunity to respond if circumstances change within that time.
Basically, that's what I feel.
I think we can accept that. I think it's probably unlikely they'll move that quickly, but I accept your point that it's wise to be prepared. Yeah. Going back then to the first matter we passed in regards to pausing the rate, do you want to provide some explanation in regard to that? It was pretty well thrashed out in our discussions. Councillor Murray-Benge.
Because we're recording this meeting, it gives the staff the opportunity to use the debate to actually give the reasons rather than us going all over them again. Does it not?
It does to an extent, but it could be helpful to just firm it up a bit, because there were quite a number of varying views expressed there.
To clarify.
Can I go to Emily?
Chair John, I think what our usual practice is to use the advantages and disadvantages in the issues and options paper for that option as the starting point for your rationale. So perhaps if you'd like to consider that and turn your mind to whether you want to modify those in any way, either by adding or amending or deleting those as the rationale.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I would support that. For those who are qualified commissioners or have been, know that you really have to speak to their submissions. We're pretty bound. So the advice from the staff, I would suggest we follow, because that is based on the submissions that came in rather than the diatribe from people who have differing views.
Councillor Daly.
I'd just like to comment, you can't use the argument that this was the most supported option because it was the lowest supported option.
Yeah. I mean, that's a technical point, given that there were 4 options there and they're not all directly opposed to one or the other. So there's overlap between the views that would have been expressed by the people who responded. Councillor Henry.
Just a question, what we're discussing now, what the response will be when we go out with the annual plan to these decisions. Will we be seeing that on again?
Emily.
So through you, Chair John, what we're discussing, what you're discussing now are the rationale for your decisions to be set out in the formal meeting minutes. As per our usual process, staff will prepare a decision document if you pass the recommendation in the paper that directs us to do that as the response submitters, and you will adopt that alongside the final annual plan at the end of June. So it will be a document that is adopted and approved by council as the formal response to submitters.
The question was, when will we see it before it's adopted?
You will see it on the agenda for the meeting of the annual plan adoption.
Councillor Murray-Benge.
Look at the advantages for option 2, and quite clearly they state very clearly as to why we made that decision, sir. So I don't think we need to actually debate each one or clarify each one. It'll take us forever.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're ready to move on to capital projects, I believe. And the changes there. David.
Good morning, Chair John. Good morning, elected members. This paper sets out some proposed changes to non-growth projects for 2023. The lion's share of the change relates to the bringing forward of budget to enable council to deliver on its aspirations for pensioner housing. There are some rationales outlined in the paper, but I'm happy to take questions should you have any on the paper.
Any questions? Seems not. Do we have someone willing to move? Councillor Henry. Option 1. Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Denyer. No speakers. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay.
So this IOP is
Sorry,
around.
excuse me, David. I had a question here, I think.
Yeah, I think just for the reasons to help staff, it's the most pragmatic way of addressing the situation, being, you know, where we've landed and the reality that it confronts us. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yep. Next.
So this issues and options paper looks at council's external debt and its strategic assumption around interest rates. So we're all familiar with the fact that council's external debt is lower than we had forecast due to some difficulties delivering the full capital program. So our opening debt is lower for this annual plan. However, markets for interest rates are increasing and are forecast to increase further over the next 12 months. What this paper does is it recommends that for this annual plan, we assume our opening debt will be lower to match our actual reality, and we increase our interest rate assumption to match what's happening in the external market to make sure that we have rated sufficiently to cover our interest expense for the year.
Thank you. Councillor Murray-Benge. Thank you. You seconding that?
Happy to second that.
No speakers?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of to speak for the motion. It is just pragmatic. It is mathematical calculation and reflects the reality that we've been talking about for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And I think in terms of the rationale, the Mayor summed it up very well already in speaking to it. I don't think there's much more we can say, is there? Okay. Updated structure plans.
So this issues and options paper covers some proposed changes to the projects we have to deliver growth around the districts. You'll see a number of schedules and maps detailing what the council proposes to deliver and able to enable growth within the district. You'll see that due to some cost escalations and realities with the market, some of those costs have increased. And this paper covers or recommends that council changes its structure plan budgets to match what our likely costs will be to enable that growth to occur.
Thank you, David. You're moving, Councillor Thwaites. Option 1, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Murray-Benge. You wish to speak to it?
I just wish the Minister of Transport would take note of what we've just decided.
Thank you. All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any comments in regard to the rationale?
Well, I think it's the same as the previous thing. This is the reality of, this is what you do an annual plan that's reviewing from the long-term plan, the changes, and these are the changes that have just come through.
Thank you. All right. So which one is this? Yes. Yep. David.
This issues and options paper is a new paper brought to the committee for consideration around what council needs to spend in order to deliver on its level of service for reserves in Omokoroa. Especially after selling a significant piece of land to the Ministry of Education. In order to meet our requirements and deliver for reserves, we need to increase the budgets for those land purchases. And the land, as we acknowledge, is becoming more expensive, and we need to make sure our budgets are adequate to enable us to move when the right piece of land comes to market.
Thank you, David. Councillor Murray-Benge.
With option 1, Sue, speak to it later.
Mr. Mayor, you seconding?
I will second on behalf of Councillor Granger, who would do it if he were here.
Thank you. Councillor Murray-Benge.
I made a facetious comment before about the Minister of Transport, but with the reserves, we desperately need them if we're really planning for the future. And there just needs to be part of a structure plan that gives people an opportunity to be there, live there. But that State Highway 2 is depressingly taking people out of Omokoroa and permanently, and I think it's really dangerous. So I can't emphasize enough. If we're forward planning, yes, we've got to provide reserves. We'd be irresponsible if we didn't, and for future generations. But please, how can we make sure we've got a decent road for people to move on?
Go from reserves to roads.
So I apologize.
All right. Mr. Mayor, will you wish to speak?
I'll speak to the motion too, as the population is going up each day. For those of us that live there, see the new houses being built. This is something we have to do, and it just reflects the real cost of the land in that community, which I think is across the whole district now.
Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, I also support this, but I am also aware when we had presentations from developers, and one developer mentioned about every dollar basically through FINCOs was creating an issue as to the price of land, and even this one. We just want to be aware in the future, perhaps when other things come up. This one, according to that rule of thumb given, is going to cost another $6,000 per lot, just to keep it in our minds.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Denia and down.
Yeah, I support this. It reflects reality, but also that as the housing in on Amakura gets intensified, our green spaces will become all the more valued and appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Daly.
Yes, I support this option. I just ask councillors and future councillors to remember this resolution when we start talking about the intensification and future development into Puke, because we're facing similar pressures to Amakura, and there is going to be a need for more reserve space into Puke as well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And again, it's been covered off, I think, the necessity of meeting the market and provide in terms of cost. All right.
Generation with 3 million plus outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then if we move to the next one, other submission comments.
This issue as an options paper covers submissions received from the public that didn't necessarily relate to what we were consulting on in the annual plan. There were an array of topics that were discussed in these submissions, and you'll see that the recommendation is that a number of these be deferred to existing operational processes and be dealt with in that manner. And there was one submission in your pack that the recommendation is that no further response is taken.
Councillor Henry.
With this one here, I have difficulty that the two topics are in the same option. So if New Zealand Chinese Language Week was not considered valid, I would not want to see Ngā Tami Wharerua not be put into the operation for the Western Bay District Council. So I would be voting, I know nothing about the Chinese week, but I certainly would go for option 1 because I believe that the second party is vitally important to be included in the operations of this council.
Right, thank you. Go to Emily before I've got a couple of other speakers lining up.
Thanks, Chair John. Just to be clear, there is no assumption around validity of these submissions in any way. A couple of them can be considered through operational processes. And in relation to the submission from Ngā Tama Wharerua, this is a much larger conversation than this annual plan will consider. And also because you have already considered that the Pukehina development rate is the only material or significant change from the long-term plan, that means that it's essentially out of scope from this annual plan consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, will you have a question or are you wanting to speak?
I have a question.
Yeah.
My question is, the submission from Ngāi Tamarawahua is refers to the Urapa, and I was wondering whether staff could sometime give us an update of where we are up to with the land in Springs Road.
Have you got another question?
It's not only about.
Oh, okay. I'll let you go.
That submission is not only about Europara, it's about their housing being under climate, it's under climate change.
We do understand that. I have Rachel in the background wanting to say something here, please. I'll come to you in a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would contend that this update that has been requested by Councillor Dean is best provided through the Performance and Monitoring Committee rather than at the Annual Plan Committee today. However, just to put your mind at rest that there is a body of work, there is a relationship being built with Ngāi Tama Wharerua. Unfortunately, there's been a changing of the guard at the Runanga, so we are waiting for their leadership to settle before engaging with them again. And some councillors will be aware that the next step that we have agreed to progress with Ngāi Tama Wharerua, including Te Puni Kōkiri and MHUD is the progression of a comprehensive housing strategy. In order to progress some of the aspirations of Ngāi Tamawharua, we need to understand housing need, not just short term and medium term, but in the longer term as well. So that is what we have collectively agreed to do. That will be, you'll probably hear this message again at the next performance and monitoring meeting, and it definitely is connected to the Urupa project. And I say that because Urupa is often connected to Pukehina.
Thank you for that. So Mayor, I'll finally come to you.
Just getting back to the agenda, I'm quite happy to move option 1 because that is the natural process for making sure these are responded to.
And did you have a response in regard to the and?
Well, and the and is
okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Thwaites.
We'll move it secondly.
Thank you. Wish to speak, Councillor Murray-Bench?
Yes, and just response to the and for the Katikati area where we're wanting to go to Springs Road. That's been on the agenda now for such a long time. It's such a great shame that things sometimes just go so slowly.
I'm not sure how that connects to the end, but never mind. I will
Just to the wider conversation on the subject, sir.
I will put the motion that we have on the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right. Next one is FINCOs. Is that back to you, David?
So we're looking at this issues and options paper looks at fees and charges, and specifically what we consulted on for FINCOs for community housing in Pukehina. The resolution recommends that we move the changes that some of the changes based on the feedback we had on consultation. I believe Jodie's on hand to take questions if there are any on the topic.
Did you wish to say something, Jodie, or just coming to answer questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Henry. Did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So I would like to move option 1.
Okay.
I would like to move option 1, and I'd like to make a point about the 10-year restriction covenant specifying the use of housing. Whilst we have discussed that, I see that in the draft further down in the annual plan, that is not mentioned. And page 564 in the Pukehina housing, the following criteria, the 10-year restricted covenant isn't mentioned. The 10-year part should be in there, I think, when it's going out to the public.
So I understand through you, Chair John, that this is essentially the attachment of what went out for consultation, and that's a matter that's arisen through the consultation period that's now being considered through this issues and options paper.
So will it appear in the annual plan?
If you pass the recommendations to
Today.
insert that, then yes, you will see that in the annual plan.
So that's
okay.
Councillor Sol.
I'm happy to second the motion.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Councillor Murray-Bench.
In speaking to it, I support the motion, but also it's a wider issue really, sir. When I look at the context and the housing action plan, we have a housing action plan that has a vision that all Western Bay residents are well housed. And that means it goes a lot wider than just what we've got before us today. So I just draw your attention to that. I don't know that we can actually guarantee it, nor can we actually finally succeed with it, but it's a much wider issue that will cover all sorts of issues that we can do in Western Bay and not just in the section.
I absolutely agree with you, but there are much bigger players than just council involved in this, in making that happen too. So I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So all right. This is the one about the library charges, is it? Yep. Well, I'm looking at the, I'm not in this agenda, I'm sorry. Can someone help me? I'm just looking at the
Page
presentation.
73 of the agenda.
Page 73.
73, I'm told. So is there someone, questions around this? Moved and seconded, Denia and Dean. Yes, please. Yes, it was option 1.
So I've got page 63 on mine, and that's FINCO's.
We've done that one.
73.
Yes, we have. We've just done it. So we're on the library fees and charges, moved and accepted. I don't know whether it's appropriate, but you've probably all read the example of the difficult councillor in Dunedin whose $12 parking fee became a $100,000 bill to council. And so sometimes as objectionable as the action may be to those with principles, sometimes you have to swallow a dead rat and take the pragmatic approach. And you could argue this is similar to that. So I beg to disagree. It is taking a pragmatic approach and saying that the cost of recovering this money is more than what is achieved. So we've moved motion. Were you wanting to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that you make a valid point, but actually just looking at the evidence around the world where this has happened, it's actually the sensible option. It's counterintuitive, but it is what works.
Thank you. So I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We're going to build a new library at Waihi Beach. Done that. So 6 fees and charges, is that correct?
So we've come to the conclusion of the issues and options paper. There are 2 last resolutions or recommendations in the paper, items 6 and 7 for the committee to consider.
Yes. So it's recommended. What was the page? Yeah, that's the one. Are you following? Do you have a page number in your agenda? Because I can't keep up, I'm sorry. Oh.
It's page 7, Chair John, on the agenda.
Yeah, so that's what we've
They're all
got.
stuck together.
There we go. So it's the last 2 parts of resolution being
So-
6
Yeah.
and 7.
So we're on 6, that it be recommended to council that the annual plan 2022-23 fees and charges 2022-23 be amended in accordance with the long-term and annual plan committee resolutions contained in the minutes of APLTP 22-23 dated 9th of June 2022, and that the amended annual plan 2022-2023 and fees and charges 2022-23 be adopted. And a note, it's very clear there. It's been stated 2022-23 because I did note in the agenda it referred in one place to the 2022-24 year, which would be a very long year. So are you wishing to move, Mr. Mayor?
It's more than happy, it's common sense, it's the right thing to do, and it just confirms it. I'm more than happy to move it, it's common sense, it's the right thing to do. It just concludes that everything we've said before we agree we're going to do.
Okay, thank you, and it's moved, Councillor Dean. Sorry, moved and seconded. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. All right, and that brings us, no, that was 6. We're now going to 7. That the committee notes that the decision story will be prepared as the formal response to submitters for adoption by council alongside the annual plan 2022-23, and that the decision story will be in general accordance with the long-term and annual plan committee resolutions contained in the minutes of APLTP 2022-23 dated 9th of June 2022. Councillor Thwaite. Thank you. And I saw the other. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So the information for receipt was nil. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. And we will adopt that formally adopt that at our council meeting just before the end of the month.
June 28th, right?
Yeah.
29th.
29th. Okay. Thank you. So I declare the meeting closed. And note that how much faster proceedings moved once the TV camera